Funny how people unsubscribe from your life without notice. One day they swear forever, the next they're gone. But hey, if you're here, hit subscribe. It's free, unlike loyalty. The night was meant to be a joyous celebration, a moment of love, new beginnings, and family unity. My husband, Brian, and I had spent years trying to expand our family, facing heartbreak after heartbreak. But finally, our prayers were answered when we adopted a wonderful 10-year-old girl named Saint. She was everything we had ever hoped for, curious, kind, and resilient beyond her years. From the moment we met her, we knew she was the missing piece to our family puzzle. To welcome her home, we decided to throw a small but heartfelt party. We spared no effort: balloons, decorations, a special cake with her name on it. This was more than just a party, it was a declaration that SDE belonged with us, that she was cherished, that she was home. Among our invited guests were my sister-in-law, Betty, her husband, Zane, and their 7-year-old daughter, Violet. Betty had always been obsessive about her daughter, treating her like royalty and expecting the rest of the family to do the same. Violet had been the only child in the family until now, and Betty made sure she was always the center of attention. The moment I told her about our adoption and the welcome party, she had responded coldly, "So, Violet won't be the only family princess now?" and then changed the subject. I brushed it off, assuming it was just a passing jealousy that would fade with time. But in the weeks leading up to the party, Betty's behavior became unsettling. She would make snide comments like, "Not every child knows how to be around a real princess," implying that SD could never compare to Violet. Still, I refused to let her negativity dictate our joy. When the big day arrived, our home was filled with warmth, laughter, and excitement. He was beaming, and Brian and I couldn't have been happier. But then Betty arrived. She walked in, stiff and uneasy, her eyes scanning the decorations with barely concealed disdain. While her husband, Zane, greeted SD warmly, Betty plastered on a forced smile and avoided eye contact. I tried to stay positive, focusing on the happiness surrounding us. But as the evening progressed, Betty's resentment became impossible to ignore. Every time someone complimented SD, Betty would shift the focus back to Violet. "Oh, SD is so polite," someone would say. "Well, Violet has been well-mannered since she could talk," Betty would chime in. "She looks so lovely in that dress." "Oh, Violet has been dressing like a princess since she was a baby." On and on it went, Betty refusing to let SD have her moment. Then I caught her whispering in a corner with a small group of family members. Her words sent a chill down my spine. "Some people just don't know how to raise a real princess," she sneered. "It takes a special kind of parent to truly nurture a child." I was done. I was about to confront her when something completely unexpected happened. Zane, who had been relatively quiet all evening, suddenly stood up. "Everyone," he said, his voice steady but firm, "I need to say something." The room fell silent. I expected a toast, maybe a warm acknowledgement of SD joining the family. Instead, he dropped a bombshell. "Betty has been lying to me for years," he announced. "I recently discovered that she cheated on me with one of my friends. And after looking into it, I found out that Violet is not my biological daughter." A stunned hush fell over the crowd. Betty went pale, her mouth opening and closing as if struggling to form words. Zane continued, his voice unwavering. "I've spent a long time coming to terms with this. I was going to handle it privately. But after seeing her behavior tonight, after watching her belittle STE just to prop up her own child, I refuse to stay silent anymore. I'm filing for divorce. I will always be there for Violet if she wants me in her life, but I won't be lied to any longer." The room stood frozen in shock. Betty, as if waking from a trance, suddenly turned and bolted from the house, her face contorted in disbelief and panic. Zane followed after her, and just like that, the night took an entirely different turn. The party continued, albeit under a shadow of tension. But as I watched SD laughing, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had unfolded, I felt a strange sense of peace. This night had been about her, about family, about love. And no matter what drama unfolded, I knew we had made the right choice in celebrating her. Since that night, Betty has vanished from family gatherings. Some relatives believe Zane was justified in exposing the truth, while others argue he should have handled it privately. A few even suggested I was at fault for throwing such a grand celebration, claiming I should have known it would provoke Betty. I struggle with guilt, wondering if I should have done things differently. But deep down, I know one thing for certain. SE deserved every ounce of joy that night. And nothing, no bitterness, no scandal, will ever take that away from her. After the shocking revelation at SD's welcome party, Brian and I made one thing clear. We would not be financially supporting Betty, not for her legal troubles, not for anything else. No matter how much she blamed us for her downfall, her marital problems were not our responsibility. Still, the situation had only grown more chaotic. Part of me wanted to confront Betty directly, to set firm boundaries and explain why we refused to help. But another part of me felt it was best to ignore her and focus on what truly mattered, SD's happiness. He had been adjusting well at home, but lately, I noticed she had grown quieter, more withdrawn. Worried me. And as it turned out, I wasn't the only one who had concerns. Zane reached out to us recently, admitting he was still struggling to process everything, but he wanted us to know he supported us, and more importantly that he was worried about Saint. His words meant a lot, especially given the havoc Betty had already caused. Then Betty escalated things in the worst possible way. She took to social media, publicly accusing Zane of being a terrible father, claiming he was abandoning Violet in her time of need. It was a stunning accusation, one that only fanned the flames of our already fractured family. Many relatives defended Zane, seeing through Betty's lies, but the fact that she felt the need to wage a public battle showed just how far she had fallen. Even worse, she tried dragging SD into the drama. Betty insinuated that if STE had never entered our lives, none of this would have happened. That was when Brian and I stepped in. We spoke with Zane and encouraged him to address the situation head-on, to tell the truth and make it clear that he was not abandoning Violet. Betty was rewriting history to make herself the victim, and it was time for him to set the record straight. But what shattered my heart the most was seeing STE internalize all of it. She started believing that she was to blame, that her presence had somehow caused the family to fall apart. Watching her struggle with emotions far too heavy for a child her age was unbearable. Brian and I reassured her again and again that none of this was her fault, that we loved her unconditionally, that she was safe with us. But the damage had been done. And then things took an even more bizarre turn. 4 months passed and Betty's actions only became more unhinged. Her online attacks against Zane continued, relentless, cruel, and completely detached from reality. She doubled down on her claim that Zane was abandoning Violet. And then, in an act of pure hypocrisy, she did the unthinkable. One evening, Betty dropped Violet off at Zane's apartment. And then, she disappeared. She didn't call. She didn't text. She simply abandoned her daughter on his doorstep and vanished. For days no one knew where she was. She had gone completely offline, and the family was left in a state of panic. Zane was beside himself, frantically trying to contact her, fearing for her well-being, but more than anything worrying about how this would affect Violet. Then out of nowhere Betty resurfaced. Not in person. Not with an apology. Not with any concern for her child. Instead she sent a text message. And what she said left us all speechless. She was on vacation. With the very man she had cheated on Zane with. And she had run out of money. Yes. Betty had the audacity to ask Zane for financial help, to fund the remainder of her getaway with her lover. She casually mentioned that she was having a great time, but needed some extra cash. The sheer gall of it was beyond belief. Zane was livid. This wasn't just selfishness. This wasn't just irresponsibility. This was a complete and utter disregard for her own child. When he confronted her, Betty twisted the narrative yet again. She painted herself as the victim, saying we didn't understand how difficult this was for her. As if she wasn't the one who had caused this disaster in the first place. But this time, Zane didn't let her manipulate him. He told her, in no uncertain terms, that she was being selfish, reckless, and completely unfit to be a mother. And for the first time since this nightmare started, he made a decision, one that would change everything. He was filing for full custody of Violet. He would no longer allow Betty's chaos to dictate their daughter's life. It was a painful choice. Despite everything, Zane had still wanted to believe Betty could be a good mother. But her actions had shown otherwise. And he refused to let Violet suffer for Betty's selfishness any longer. At a family meeting, Zane laid everything bare. He spoke about how difficult it had been to accept the truth, how much he had struggled with the fallout, and how, through it all, his priority remained the same, being the father Violet needed. For the first time, some members of the family who had been hesitant finally understood the gravity of the situation. As we sat there watching the family slowly shift their perspective, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all waiting for the next big disaster. Because Betty wasn't going to go quietly. And I had a terrible feeling she was about to do something even worse. Betty had every opportunity to change. Every chance to take responsibility. But instead of accepting the consequences of her actions, she doubled down. Since losing custody of Violet, she had completely unraveled. Instead of taking a step back and reflecting on how she ended up here, Betty embraced the victim narrative with everything she had. She flooded social media with tirades about how unfair the court system was, how Zane had manipulated the process to steal Violet from her. It was as if she lived in her own little world where she was the tragic main character, and everyone else was the villain. And of course she tried rallying family members to her side. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. We were done. Done with the drama, the chaos, the manipulation. As a family, we made the decision not to engage with her anymore. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like we had reclaimed some peace. But Betty wasn't going to let go that easily. One particularly embarrassing moment came when she showed up, completely uninvited, at a family gathering. She barged in, demanding to speak with Zane, her face flushed with anger. The tension in the room was thick. She launched into a rant about how she was being treated unfairly, how no one understood her pain, how Zane had stolen Violet from her. But this time no one indulged her. Instead of arguing, instead of getting caught up in her madness, Zane simply looked at her and said, "Betty, please leave." That was it. A simple, calm request. And the moment he said it, something shifted. It was a turning point, not just for him but for all of us. We weren't going to play her games anymore. She couldn't control us with her tantrums, couldn't manipulate us into giving her attention. The silence in the room was deafening. Betty stood there for a moment as if waiting for someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one did. Eventually she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Since then her behavior has remained predictable, lashing out, seeking sympathy, retreating into self-pity, and then repeating the cycle. But each time she does it, she isolates herself further. The thing is, Betty thrives on attention. And we weren't giving it to her anymore. Zane, meanwhile, stayed focused on what truly mattered, Violet. He worked tirelessly to create a safe, stable environment for her. No theatrics, no chaos, just love, structure, and security. And the results were undeniable. Violet was thriving. It was remarkable to see the difference between the steady, nurturing home Zane built for her and the chaotic, destructive one Betty had created. As for Betty, her downward spiral continued. She lost connections with friends and relatives who had grown exhausted by her endless drama. And while it was sad to watch someone we once cared about self-destruct, we knew one thing. She had to take responsibility for her actions. And we weren't going to let her drag us down with her anymore. Healing and moving forward. With the chaos settling, we finally had the chance to focus on something far more important. The past few months had taken a toll on her. At first, she had been so excited about her new life. But as the tension between Betty and Zane escalated, it weighed on her. She had started to retreat into herself, convinced that she was the cause of all the family turmoil. Nothing broke my heart more than hearing her ask if everything would have been better if she had never come into our lives. We told her over and over again that none of this was her fault, that she was loved, that she was wanted. But words alone weren't enough. She needed to feel safe. And finally, with the custody battle over and the family drama dying down, she did. For the first time in a long time, SD was smiling again. She was opening up, talking more, participating in family activities without hesitation. The change in her was undeniable. And in that moment I realized something. We had made it through the storm. The chaos, the heartbreak, the betrayals, none of it had broken us. Instead, we had come out stronger. As for Betty, she was still out there, clinging to the narrative that she was the victim, still trying to manipulate, still trying to stir up drama. But we weren't looking back anymore. Our focus was on the future. A future built on love, stability, and healing. And nothing, not even Betty's chaos, was going to take that away from us. Final update, a new beginning. It has been a long and difficult journey, but we are finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Sty has stepped up in the most beautiful way. She has become the best big sister Violet could ask for, always by her side, always making her feel loved. Their bond has only grown stronger, and it warms my heart to see them support each other every day. And the biggest change? Sty is finally learning that it's okay to be happy, even when things are difficult. She no longer carries the weight of guilt, no longer worries that she is the reason for all the past chaos. Instead, she is embracing the love and stability we have worked so hard to build. Seeing her laugh freely, participate in family activities, and truly enjoy life again has been one of the most rewarding parts of this entire experience. Betty's last chance. 6 months after the custody ruling, Betty finally reached out. We were shocked to say the least. Given everything that had happened, meeting her felt like a terrible idea. But after a long family discussion, we decided to give her one chance, to hear her out. Zane was clear. He would not be dragged back into her chaos. The meeting took place at a small cafe. Betty looked different, tired, defeated, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up to her. The moment we sat down, she started talking. She admitted that losing custody of Violet and facing divorce had broken her, that she was ready to change, that she wanted to be a better mother. For the first time, there were no accusations, no attempts to shift blame, just raw honesty. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke about her loneliness, how she had pushed everyone away, how she had lost not just her daughter but the family she once had. But Zane didn't waver. He told her the truth, he no longer trusted her. Violet's well-being was his only priority, and he couldn't allow her to be caught in Betty's chaos ever again. Betty pleaded, insisting they could fix things. But the reality hit her like a brick wall. This was beyond repair. She had lost her family and there was no going back. After that meeting, something changed in her. She went quiet. No more social media rants. No more desperate texts. It was as if, for the first time, she had truly realized the impact of her actions. A glimmer of hope. Over the next few weeks, we saw small but promising signs. Betty started therapy. She reached out to family members she had alienated. She asked about Violet, not to demand anything but just to know how she was doing. Zane, cautious but fair, decided to give her a small chance. Supervised visits. A slow, careful process. We were all wary, but we also wanted to believe in redemption. Violet was confused but hopeful. She still loved her mother despite everything, and Zane made sure she understood that love was okay. He was careful with his words, ensuring Violet knew that while Betty was trying to change, it would take time. Slowly, trust began to rebuild. Moving forward, Zane, for his part, has been a rock. He has done everything to create a safe, loving home for Violet. Family dinners, game nights, weekend outings, filling their lives with new, happy memories. And Violet is thriving. She is learning that happiness isn't something you have to feel guilty about. That it's okay to enjoy life even when things aren't perfect. Sty, our little angel, has been right there beside her. She has been a source of love, strength, and comfort in ways we never expected. The way she has embraced her role as Violet's sister has been nothing short of incredible. And as for Betty, she still has a long way to go. There are moments where she slips into old habits, moments of frustration, moments where her progress feels shaky. But she is trying. She has finally realized that being a mother isn't about control, it's about love. And while we are cautiously optimistic, we also know that trust takes time. Zane remains firm. Violet's safety and happiness come first. No more chaos. No more manipulation. Just a slow, careful path forward. A lesson for us all. This journey has taught us so much about love, responsibility, and the importance of putting children first. Betty's story is a reminder that actions have consequences. That when we allow toxicity to consume us, we risk losing the people we love. But it's also a story of hope. That even in the darkest moments, change is possible, if we're willing to take responsibility for our actions. For those of you who have followed this story, I want to ask, does this resonate with you? Have you ever had to set boundaries to protect your peace? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this story has touched you in any way, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve a life filled with love, stability, and happiness. Thank you for being a part of this journey.